So I was cut off by a phone call when I was gonna give an invention. Goddamn mold in here, the windows are closed. Ah, sinuses too. Yeah, anyways, so I was planning on giving this invention, but I gave a warning. Do not repeat this invention. It's a hunting invention that's used to take down big game, bears, giant animals. You could take down a goddamn rhino if you wanted with nothing more than a fucking airsoft gun or a child's bow. And you could take down a goddamn rhino or whatever else you need. And this is one of the inventions I invented, just something you throw together in case of an emergency. Maybe if you're going and you're going to live in the jungles of South America, you know, maybe go find some of these common ingredients and put them together. What you're going to need is some building equipment like a hot glue gun, maybe a welding gun, some more industrial glues, just some basic building equipment. I always forget to mention that. Oh, God. So I usually forget to mention that, yes, you got to have some building equipment always. You know, some tape, some glue, hot glue gun, welding gun, just the basics. You're not going to need a welding gun in this one, I don't believe, though. You might need a saw or a knife. You know, just a bread knife or a saw or something. Pretty basic stuff to have around. But you are going to need to have these basic things like glue, a saw, a knife, stuff like that. Very basic. But the main components of this put together invention is a pen. Just any pen from a bank will do. A syringe. Hot glue. Obviously, I already mentioned that. Bow and arrow. And if you can find one, not necessary, but better if you can find one, screw off to a bow and arrow tip. So that's just the screw end, just a basic screw that fits on the end of the staff, the rod. Because you're going to go to Walmart and for $2.50, you'll pick up a bow arrow rod. Just the rod. There's no arrow on the tip. No sharp arrow. Just the rod with the female screw. With the female slot. With the female slot. Then you're going to look for just a male screw with no tip. You don't have to have it though. Then you're with $3, 10 syringes. You could easily just need one, so maybe for $1 or $2, if you can find singles, you can go to any pharmacy with an ID. They're not illegal. You just go find a nice skinny small syringe. The bigger the tip, the better, believe it or not. So then you get your ingredients and you come home. You're going to take the plunger out of the syringe. You're going to leave the cap on too. You don't need to take the cap off. But you're going to take the plunger out of the syringe. Then you're going to take the saw and you're going to cut it down the size. Then you're going to take the plunger and you're going to cut off a section of the plunger and then make it smaller. Then you're going to cut off the flat tip where your thumb would go, because you're not going to need a thumb. Then you're going to heat gun or use a lighter to kind of clean up some of the plastic to make it smooth again. Then you're going to take the pen spring. You're going to drop it inside the syringe. And remember, some are bigger, some are smaller, but most pen springs will fit inside of a syringe hole. So you're going to throw the spring inside the syringe hole, and you're going to put the plunger in. But the spring is going to try to push the plunger out to a certain point. Now, underneath where that plunger is, you're going to put 1 drop of plastic or glue. Now, the way I do this is a super glue with baking soda. And you got to make sure that the plunger is in once when you do this, because you need it not touching the plunger. The plunger will be at a T, will be like an X. In the corners of that X, you want to make it so the plunger no longer can slide out. You don't want it to be able to slide out when you draw the bow back. So there's going to be one drop of glue at the end, because remember, you sawed off the end of the syringe. And then you also sawed off part of the plunger, the end of that. And then you're putting the plunger in, and what you'll notice is there's no place to push, and there's some space where it wiggles around. Well, on the end, you're going to put some glue that will keep it from wiggling around. And don't forget, you got a spring inside where the fluid would go. So inside, where you would pull up liquids, there is a spring. Then you're going to take the hot glue, no more super glue, you're going to switch to the hot glue, and you're just going to put a little ring around the tip of the needle, giving it kind of a sponge-like, giving it only like, we only want to put a tiny bit, because this needle has to be at an arrow point. Remember, the point of this needle has to be still injectable, but you want it to come to a point. You want to then harden it with plastic, or you can use the super glue and baking soda and then sand it down. You can also use a metal and try to wrap it. Anything to make that point more like an arrow tip. You want to make it come to a point, and only a little tiny bit of the actual syringe at the end is still showing. So it's more like a traditional rounded arrow tip. Instead of being just a syringe with one needle coming out, you need it to be tapered off. That's pretty easy to do. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take that whole little mini, so you cut off about maybe 3/4 of the actual fluid of the syringe. And you got a spring inside, and you have a blocker so it doesn't pop out, so the spring doesn't pop out the plunger. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to push the spring down, and you're going to take your favorite super lethal poison. Like you could use something like, well, let's say you live in North America. You could use, there's a couple animals that produce poison, but I think that rattlesnake or English yew might be your best bet. And you're going to concentrate that down to a lethal level. Now, depending on the snake you can find, or the plant, or the poison that you can buy online, or whatever, you can find the most lethal substance that has a quick acting time. You want it to be, if you're taking down a bear or an elephant, it's going to have to be some strong ass shit. We're talking about way more than a diamondback rattlesnake. An English yew wouldn't be powerful enough either. Well, those are just some examples. You can get actual tranquilizer fluid and things for taking down large game. Whatever large game chemical you prefer, you're going to pull up in the syringe. Now, you're going to have to make a cap or something to make sure you don't poke yourself. You don't want to poke yourself on this. But the good part about it is the spring is going to be like a safety. The spring inside the syringe makes it harder to inject. It has to have a lot of force, because you got to push against the spring and the fluid. So not only do you have to push the fluid in, you also got to push the spring in. Now you got to make sure this is a very small spring so it jams up, and this spring will make it so not all the fluid will inject. Remember that too, that not all the fluid will be injected. And you remember, you only have a small little sliver, so you're only injecting maybe a drop or two into this. So you want the most powerful agent you can find. But I'm sure I could create something that would take down 3 elephants at one drop. I'm absolutely sure I could create a poison that would take down an elephant with one drop. Just by ordering stuff on Amazon and cooking it in a well-ventilated area with a fume hood. But that's just me. Maybe you just know how to boil down plants and you make your own poison for turkeys. English yew probably would be enough for you for there. Now you're going to connect, not the plastic piece, but you're going to connect the plunger to the tip inside hole of the shaft of the arrow. So the shaft of the arrow, there's a little hole where you would normally put the arrow tip into the shaft. But instead, you're going to melt the plastic and make a thread and try to get that in there with glue to be a permanent hold into the arrow shaft. So now you only have a centimeter and the actual plunger is what's connected, and there's a spring preventing the liquid from coming out. And you pull up your liquid, you pull back the bow, and you fire. Now remember, you're going to need some type of cap on the end to try to help not leakage, or you can pull it up when you get there. It wouldn't be that hard to leave something at your feet and draw it up before, like how you light an arrow. When you have a flaming arrow, you keep it soaked in gasoline, but you don't light it until you're ready to use it. You know what I mean? You go down over a flame and then you go.